In this module, we're going to go ahead and learn how to model and sculpt a stylized stone. So before starting the scene, I really want to start with sort of setting a style for the whole environment. So I went ahead and drew a little bit of a concept of what I want my rocks to look like. Sort of very stylized, very geometrical shapes. I think it's going to really well translate into our scene. So as you can see, I drew a little concept here, and I do that quite often. I don't like to spend too much time modeling and too much time in ZBrush. I prefer to draw a little concept or doodle the best you can. You don't really have to make anything spectacular, but just to give yourself an idea of where you're going to go with your sculpts. So let's go ahead and bring that concept into 3ds Max. I'm going to go ahead and create a plane here. I'm just going to go click F and go in the front perspective. And if you're doing this tutorial, you should really have at least a basic knowledge of ZBrush and 3ds Max. You don't want to start this tutorial if you're not familiar with the software. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the length and width of the plane to the same exact ratio. So it's 400 by 400 centimeters. It doesn't really matter what size it is as long as it's a square. And I'm going to go ahead into my material editor here. Let me just bring that over here. And I'm going to select the second material, but it doesn't really matter which one you choose. And I'm going to select the bitmap, and I'm going to go ahead and find my source folder here. And here I got my concept here. And I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the plane. And as you can see, nothing happened. And of course, because we don't have the show bitmaps on. So I'm going to go ahead back into the source of the material, click bitmap, and now we can see our stone. Now, the reason why I made it absolutely square is because I prefer to draw concepts or whatever references I'm using in 3ds Max into a perfect square. That way, I don't have to find out the exact ratio of the square. So whenever you're trying to put something into 3ds Max, the best way to do it is just to crop it into a square, and it's going to work just fine. All right, I'm going to move that a little bit back here. I'm going to go in right click, Object Properties, and I'm going to deselect Show Frozen in Gray. Now I can just go ahead and freeze that. So now if we go into our front perspective, we can see our stone. Now as you can see, I drew it in a slight perspective, so we're going to have to work with what we have here. I'm going to go ahead and create a box. And I'm going to make sure I'm in the shaded mode. I'm using 3ds Max 2016. I just find it most intuitive to myself. So I'm clicking Alt-X to make things transparent. And I'm going to go ahead and just sort of match the shape of the bigger section here. I'm going to add a division. And all I'm really doing here is just trying to give it a rough shape. I don't want to model the actual rock. I just want to have a good idea of what I'm doing in ZBrush when I'm going to bring that in. So let's go ahead and actually move those up a little bit. And select these vertices here, move a little bit here. And once again, if you're not familiar with 3ds Max, this course is really a little bit too advanced for you, so you should go ahead and practice a little bit more in the modeling. But you should be able to do these things without any problems. So that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and bring another box. I'm going to put that over here. And at this point, I'm just trying to block out the stone. I'm not really interested in any fine detail or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and add a division here. Move that around here. And again, I'm trying to not have any sort of absolutely flat shape. So I'm going to go ahead and try and get it slightly more irregular. So I'm going to get these vertices. And I'm not too worried about any sort of smoothing errors or anything like that, because all of this is going to be sculpted upon later on. So I'm going to make these transparent again. I'm going to go hold Shift and duplicate this piece here. And bring that over here. So I'm clicking Alt-X to make things transparent. And I'm just going to go ahead and push that over here. So now I'm just going to start looking at my concept. I'm going to click G to get rid of the grid here because it's kind of annoying. And I'm going to go ahead, grab these vertices over here and just push them a little bit out. And again, I'm not looking for any amazing modeling here. I'm just trying to block out what I want out of my rock here. So I'm going to grab another shape. It's going to duplicate this one here. And going to go ahead and rotate it. And I'm not rotating it by any perfect angles. Again, I'm just trying to get a good shape out of it. And if I'm going to have everything perfect, then it's not going to really work as a random stone here. I'm going to move that around here. That's pretty good. Move that around here, perhaps a little bit more out. I'm just trying to match the concept a little bit. I don't really have to because, again, it's all sort of intuitive as long as I get the gist of the idea out there. Most of these shapes will be really altered in ZBrush when I start sculpting. I'm just going to select all these vertices here. And I'm going to extend here and I'm going to flatten them to Y. Up a little bit, move that here, here, and here. And it's sort of already looking like my concept a little bit. I'm just going to drop that over here. It's looking a little bit too extreme at this point, but again, something I can fix in ZBrush. So I'm going to grab the vertices here, push them over here, move the bottom up, and move that to the side. That looks pretty good, I think. Now in the back it's a little bit too flat, so I'm going to grab one of these shapes. And because I don't have a back concept, I'm just going to improvise a little bit here. So I'm going to make sure I have something there. And that looks pretty good. And this shape here, a little gap in here. I'm going to add a loop and move that around here. That's looking pretty good. I'm just gonna move that out a little bit. Here we go. That's looking pretty good. I'm just gonna alter it a little bit more just so I know exactly where I want it to be. Perfect. Let's go ahead and just apply a gray material at this point and give it a little bit of shading. That's looking pretty good. I'm really liking this. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and select all of the meshes and just going to click attach here. I'm going to go in a list and I'm going to drag that over here. And I'm going to attach all of these together. I don't want them to be separate objects. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and select all the edges here and click chamfer. Maybe a couple times just so I have a little bit of softness here. And then I'm going to add Turbo Smooth. And this looking pretty good. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead, select all of these stones, go to File, Export, Export Selected, OBJ, and I'm going to locate our folder again. I'm going to go into the OBJs folder, name it Rock Base 01. And I'm going to, in preset, select ZBrush here. Let me just drag that so you can see. Click Preset, ZBrush, and let's click Export. So this is it for this clip. In the next clip, we're going to go ahead into ZBrush and start sculpting this.